Tower, QLAM 970, declare an emergency.
Mid-air collision in Denver. And is the FAA threatening flight instruction through a new ruling? This and more on Taking Off. Welcome to Taking Off. I'm Christy Wong, and you're watching the latest topics and issues in general aviation, sponsored by Gold Seal and Flying Eyes Optics. First up, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit made its ruling last month on the Warbird Adventures versus FAA case. According to the appeal, last year, the FAA ordered Warbird Adventures of Kissimmee, Florida, to stop providing paid flight instruction in one of the company's airplanes, a Curtiss-Wright Model P-40, because it was not certified for that purpose. It is considered a limited category aircraft, which is a special airworthiness certificate granted to operate surplus military aircraft converted for civilian use after certain conditions are met. One of the conditions is that no person may operate a limited category aircraft carrying persons or property for compensation or hire. According to court documents, after receiving that order from the FAA, Warbird Adventures continued to provide paid flight instruction in the P-40 without a waiver, then continued to advertise the paid flight instruction in the P-40, and refused to disavow future use of the P-40 for paid flight instruction. The combination of these things led the FAA to issue an emergency cease and desist order against Warbird Adventures for operating limited category aircraft for paid instruction without a required exemption. It should be noted that Warbird Adventures never filed for or requested a waiver according to the appeal documents. However, what has many advocacy groups in a twist is the court's interpretation of flight instruction in general. In the appeal, they spell out that a flight student is indeed a person, and when a student is learning to fly in an airplane, that student is carried. Furthermore, when the student is paying for the instruction, the student is being carried for compensation. Yet, flight instruction has not previously been considered the carriage of persons for compensation or hire according to the regs. Historically, that has referenced operations in which people are paying for the privilege of air carriage from one place to another. In fact, flight instructors are even exempt from the holding out rules that apply to commercial pilots. It's also the reason why CFIs aren't required to carry a second-class medical when operating as a flight instructor, while commercial pilots acting as commercial pilots must do so. What makes this even more perplexing is that several entities, such as AOPA, EAA, the National Association of Flight Instructors, and several others wrote a friend of the court briefing for the judges ahead of the ruling, detailing these interpretations to give them a better understanding of the regulations. Yet, the court still ruled against it and provided their own interpretations. General Counsel for AOPA, Justine Harrison, states, "Something to consider is that this could mean broad language which could have sweeping effects on flight instruction, including barriers for owners of limited category aircraft to receive training in their own airplanes." So, what do you think about this interpretation? Do you think this ruling will affect the future of flight instruction? We'd like to know your comments below, especially if you're a current CFI. Okay, next up. You've likely heard the news of this incredible story on social media and other news outlets. This week, a Key Lime Air cargo Metroliner suffered substantial damage when it incurred a mid-air collision with a Cirrus, and everybody lived. We don't know the exact details yet, but the flight tracks and ATC audio is available to the public. This all happened at Centennial Airport in Denver. Tower controllers were running parallel operations on both runways 17 left and 17 right. This practice is not uncommon, especially at busy airports. Cirrus 416 Delta Juliet was in what appeared to be the downwind leg to runway 17 right when Tower cleared him to land. He was given 2 traffic alerts for a Cessna in the pattern as well as the Metroliner on approach to the parallel runway 17 left. Take a listen to air traffic control.
Cirrus 6 Delta Juliet, traffic is following, just turned right base. They're heading to the right, 6,600 Cessna.
Traffic in sight, 6 Delta Juliet.
Cirrus 6 Delta Juliet, follow them, runway 17 right, cleared to land. Additional traffic, north shores, the Metroliner for the parallel.
I have traffic in sight, clear to land, 17 right, 6 Delta Juliet.
It's not exactly clear why it happened, but Cirrus 6 Delta Juliet appears to have been doing 160 knots when he made that base turn and overshot the final approach course for 17 right, which put him right in the path of the Metroliner and right over the top of the bright green fuselage, taking a chunk with it. Let's go to everyone's favorite Cirrus pilot, Bryan Turner, for a look at what the typical pattern speeds are for a Cirrus.
Hey, thanks, Christy. Yeah, I'm very familiar with the pattern speeds on a plane like this Cirrus here. This is the one that I fly. I think it's a great idea to know how fast you're supposed to fly your pattern, commit those numbers to memory so that you can fly a consistent pattern every time. And in a Cirrus like this, and probably the G5 in this incident, if memory serves, the pattern speeds are, I think if I recall, it was 100 knots on downwind, 90 on base, and I think it's 80 on final, and then I believe 78 as you're crossing the numbers. Those are the pattern speeds that I remember being taught when I was learning to do transition training in this Cirrus. So back to you, Christy.
The Cirrus, knowing he was in imminent danger, deployed the Cirrus airframe parachute system, known as CAPS, or more commonly known as just the chute. The pilot and passenger landed safely in the field below with no major injuries. To get a better idea of the envelope for deployment of the chute system, let's go back to Bryan.
Hey, Christy. Yes, this pilot was definitely on the lower end of the envelope with respect to his altitude for successful CAPS deployment. I believe this was a 2016 Gen 5, and I believe in that aircraft, 400 feet is the maximum demonstrated altitude loss for a CAPS deployment. And so what happens is that sort of sets the bottom part of the envelope. Above that, you're going to have a good outcome. And I think the speed restriction on that is 140 knots or less. If you stay inside that envelope, you're going to have a successful deployment. There have definitely been successful ones outside of those parameters, but inside, you're pretty much guaranteed to be safe. It also varies model by model. In my Gen 1, it's under 133 knots and 500 feet. So you've flown with me, you know at 500 feet, I tap the caps and flaps, and so I know I'm inside my prescribed parameters. So stay inside those parameters, and you'll have a successful deployment.
Thank you, Bryan Turner from Just Plain Silly. The Metroliner declared an emergency, mistakenly thinking his right engine had failed.
Cirrus 6 Delta Juliet, do not overshoot the final. Cirrus 6 Delta Juliet, do you require assistance?
Tower, Keyline 970, declare an emergency. We had, looks like the right engine failed, so I'm going to continue my landing here.
Keyline 970, we have crews coming, continuing down runway 17 left, clear 2 land.
Continue.
Cirrus 6 Delta Juliet, if you hear this transmission, we have emergency vehicles, your direction.
And Tower, there's another one, it's probably a Cirrus that dropped the parachute final for runway 17.
Thank you.
He calmly did what he was trained to do: aviate, navigate, and communicate, and got the damaged aircraft down safely. The pictures are incredible, and it's amazing that no one was seriously hurt. My takeaway from this to become a better pilot is to always keep my head on a swivel, especially in a busy environment, especially when it's VFR. The airport I fly the Warrior out of is fairly busy and has 2 parallel runways. I teach my students to be mindful of traffic on the other runway and to be aware of which way the wind is coming from so as not to get blown into the other flight path, and to dogleg final when necessary. What are your takeaways? Leave your comments below. Keyline Flight 970 is sure to go down in history as one of the luckiest outcomes possible in a mid-air collision. Great job to the pilot for keeping his composure in an emergency situation and getting down in one piece, so to speak. He was so cool and calm. I definitely want to be that guy when I grow up. And the Cirrus pilot? He probably added a lot of fuel to the raging Cirrus chute debate. But without that chute, there would have been 2 fatalities. Had there been a loss of life, there would have been a seriously different outcome, pun intended. And working the pattern was a student on his first solo. Nice cut shirt for this one, and definitely one for the logbook. All of us at TakingOff send our congrats. Now for a quick update. My airline is recalling pilots back into training, and I'm just waiting on a class date. Chances are I'll be back in training by around August. Yay! So what does this mean for the airlines in general? Well, it's looking like things are picking back up overall, at least here in the US. And that pilot shortage they were talking about a couple years ago? My prediction is that it's about to come back hard. When the airlines were trying to mitigate furloughs last year, they offered a lot of early retirements. In addition, the peak retirements aren't due to hit us until 2023 and 2024, which means a lot of pilot seats to fill for again booming airlines. As long as we continue to trend upward in air travel, the need is going to increase. So get those resumes updated and submitted. And if you're a pilot wannabe, always gazing up at the sky and dreaming like I once did, now's the time to get started on those ratings. We love all of you, our fans. It's always great interacting with you on the comments when possible. Our Hangar Club and Patreon supporters get special access to meet and greet with us through Zoom. If you're interested, check out the links below. Also, if you've been wanting a pair of Flying Eye sunglasses, head over to their website and use discount code TakingOff, all caps, for 10% off. We're in a mad competition with some of our friends. Hashtag don't tell Lou Dix. We also have those high quality t-shirts that you can get in the link below, such as Dan's favorite color, the one I'm wearing today, emerald green. Thanks again for all of your support of our channel. You guys are absolutely the best. As always, safe flying, and we'll see you next time on Taking Off.